G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 95 today. And today we're talking about the launch of our Relocation Guide series and doing a bit of Q&A from our Facebook group. Join with me as always is my brother from another mother, Mr. James Ridley, who's the Managing Director for the Australian office and looks after the Asia and Americas region. G'day, mate.
G'day, Brett. And God, you're showing your age when you're saying those sort of sayings. Gosh, haven't heard that for about 20 years, aren't you?
Oh, my daughters love it. My daughters love it. It's one of those things where it's just I think there's one word that I love to use against me. It's cringe, Dad. Cringe.
I know, big time. But those who are joining us on YouTube, you can see on the left, my left-hand side, or I guess depends on how you see it. Brett Evans of the EMEA region, the managing director, the founding director actually of the Alice Wealth Group, and those that are listening in, his is the silky smooth voice as well. And as Brett said, we're jumping into a bit of a series, I guess, or a release where we're going to be doing multiple relocation guides for Australian expats. Sort of, I guess, what you'd say. What do you think, Brett? The nuts and bolts.
Look, it's not, sometimes it's nice for us to talk about non-financial stuff, just sort of freshens the equation. And this is a real deep dive. This has been 6 months in the works. If you want a comprehensive guide on how to relocate to Dubai and you want to know everything, 64 pages of goodness, 63, 65, around that sort of page. And it goes into everything about visas. Can you drink alcohol here? What's the licensing, housing, ajaris, the whole shebang. So it's a series going to roll out to a lot of the expat hubs over time. Very proud of it. Team's worked really hard on it. I think everyone will agree it's something that, it's the intellectual knowledge that people have in certain locations that enable expatriation to be successful. Because if you can remove the friction, you can take away the unknown unknowns and go in prepared. It's a great experience, and moving to these locations, they're not exactly, they're not hardship posting, let's be honest. So the better you can make that experience, the more positive it is for you and your family. And it's just something we like to do. Obviously, we get our nerd hats on and get our Excel spreadsheets out on our job, but sometimes it's nice to give back to the community, just with all the knowledge that we accumulate through working with expats in 50 countries. We're in a very fortunate position to sit here and it's a data mine. It's amazing. I can have conversations between Angola and Denmark and UAE all in the same day.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I mean, as I've read through it a few times now, I mean, there's a few words that come to mind, but just provided me with a lot of comfort going, oh, okay, great. There's a really good tool for understanding local customs. Where's the best place for me to maybe rent or potentially buy a property? Who are the best people to use for that? Down to visas, going to get your groceries, cars, health insurance. Just covers so much. So it is very broad, but also down to extracurricular activities for the kids after schools. What's people doing on the weekend? What are your hobbies? Those sort of things. So it's just this terrific blueprint where if I'm moving to Dubai, say in 12 months time or something, I'd be going through this with a fine-tooth comb. And then obviously that's going to further lead into, setting myself up correctly rather than trying to make it all up as I get there and probably making a few mistakes on the way. I think this will obviously probably remove a lot of mistakes that people will make when they head over to obviously the sandpit.
And there's always a cost with everything, and the cost for the folks is gratitude. We don't want a dime for this. Lonely Planet and all these guys used to write all these articles. These days, we can produce these documents and give them to the good folk out there for free. So it's something that we like to give back to the community. It's a big thing for us. Is it's not always about the take; it's about the give as well too. So we'll put links below to the guide, and people can download it, give us feedback. There will be yearly editions. So one thing, especially about the UAE, the laws are changing every 5 minutes. So what we write in 2023 will be obsolete in 2024. So we'll be doing updated versions for that. But guys, let us know in the comments, what your thoughts are, feedback and stuff. Are we on the right path, or we just, gone off on it with the fairies and we should scrap the idea? I think it's good. I've talked to everyone about it's good. It's something that, it's been raised to us for years and years and years. And look, there's different versions. There's relocation guides that are designed for all expats. But to us, it's the questions that Aussies have. Where do you buy your Vegemite, and can you get barbecue shapes? It's that sort of stuff that we like to get involved in.
That's right, mate. And I think as we roll out the others over a bit of time, we'll be trying to focus on obviously where we know our clients are, those hubs where Australians are. You consider the United States, look at all the states, look at all the different states. We know there's big hubs in, I suppose, California. We know there's big hubs in New York. There's definitely a big hub in Texas. There's definitely probably another 8 more states there. Absolutely. You look at Singapore, you look at Hong Kong, plenty throughout the Middle East as well, especially with the big push on Saudi at the moment. So over time, we'll release more and more, and there's something that we'll just update. As you said, we'll update ideally on an annual basis. But again, it is a terrific blueprint for when you're relocating to Dubai.
Yeah, look, it's written by an Aussie for an Aussie. So I think folks will find it of value. We're very proud of it. And as I said, but the market's always right. So if you've got any comments or feedback, info@atlaswealth.com, or if you're watching this on YouTube, chuck it in the comments below and let us know, because we have an idea, but it's the good folk on these calls that are the ones that are going to be the consumers of that guide, and that can tell us whether we're on the money or we should give up our day jobs and go fishing.
I don't mind fishing.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's good fishing here, as you know. So, hey, let's also too. I was just going to say we have to do the disclaimer as well, which I forgot to do. All the information that we're going to espouse today should be treated as informational and educational purposes only. Please do not construe this as personal advice. If you do require personal advice, have a chat to us. Reach out to us at atlaswealth.com/contact. We'd love to help. So, mate, let's jump into the Australian Expat Financial Forum, which is a Facebook group we run. I think 2,200 members and growing rapidly. I can't remember the numbers, but it's growing very rapidly. And we run this once again, like the guide, as a bit of an addendum to what we provide to expats, no cost, of course. We chucked up a post on the 23rd of August. Drop a question about the problem you're trying to solve managing your finances as an expat. So, mate, let's jump into this. Let's sort of go through. I'm going to throw some questions at you. You can throw some questions at me. First one I'd love to talk about is Carol. So Carol's moving back to Oz in 1 to 2 years at less than 55 years of age, 5 to 6 years as an E3 resident in the US. When will I access my Social Security and my 401k?
Yeah. So great question. So E3 visa, for those that aren't in the US, that's the most common that Australians head over into the United States. The 401k, that's their retirement equivalent of, say, super. Now, technically, when you leave your employer in the United States, you can actually access your 401k early. You can access it before the legal preservation age, or access age of 59 and a half. If you do, you usually incur a penalty tax of 10% on top of what they usually charge, which is the non-resident alien tax rate of 30%. You can submit a W-8 Ben form to try and remove that, but unfortunately the platform or the 401k provider, they still need to make the decision of whether they acknowledge that, whether they're going to change the withholding tax. So you can access 401k before 55 or before 59 and a half, but you just do pay some additional tax in the US, and then it's also going to be taxed in Australia, but you'll get a foreign tax credit, and there'll be a bit of working there that you'll need a specialist Australian accountant to take care of. Social Security, good question. So much like in Australia, if you're going to be accessing the age pension, you need a minimum of 10 years on the bank or in the bank in terms of working life. So the same in the US, you need a minimum of 40 quarters or 10 calendar years working, and that's that Social Security contribution through the tax system. You can technically start to access it pretty early. In the US, you can access it from 62 technically. If you wait until, say, 70, each year it currently indexes by just over 6.8% per annum, which is a pretty good indexation rate. The good thing about Social Security is that is actually the one thing that the double taxation agreement between Australia and the United States carves out. It's probably the only good thing, to be honest.
Not many things.
No, no, that's right. And then the positive thing about that means that as you're drawing, say, a social security income into maybe a US bank account and then bring it back to Australia, you actually don't need to declare that income to the ATO via your Australian tax return because it's carved out in the DTA. There'll be a bit of withholding tax applied on the United States side, which is normal, and that's it. So right now, if you're getting paid in US dollars or a currency that's tethered to the US dollar, not a bad time. Not a bad time to be converting that to AUD because you look at where the
Certainly.
currency is right now. That's
Yeah,
it. That's it. So I
pressure's
mean
on the downside. So
that's probably a good way to probably answer that question. I feel like I've covered quite well then. Another question here for you, Brett, by Jay. What's the best way to move money over taking advantage of the exchange rate? Do you just save up until the rate is good, then transfer a large amount? Thoughts on that one, Brett?
and it's easy answer.
Mm.
And the question back to Jay is, how do you know when the rate is good? So it's
I
subjective
don't
all
have
the
that
time.
crystal ball.
No, no one does. And if we did, we'd be sitting on a yacht, probably 200-meter yacht in the Bahamas, having a great time. When you're an expat, the only way you can take advantage of currency is actually try and minimize the risk. And how you minimize the risk is use dollar cost averaging.
Yeah.
So little and often is the way to go. These days, with a lot of currency brokers, there's no minimum. So whether you transfer $1,000 or $5,000, you should be getting pretty similar rates. So there's no real cost benefit equation. The benefit of doing frequent and often is you're getting different price points. You don't know if it's a good price until after you've actually transferred. You transfer it
Yeah.
today, US 63.50 to the Aussie. You wake up tomorrow morning at 62.50. So then okay, well, I'll transfer a bit more. Whereas if it goes up to 64, you look like a genius, but you never knew that at the time. So the best way to do it is remove the emotion out of the equation, because human beings by nature will always try to get something better. So you'll talk yourself out of it. And we saw that when the dollar was at 56 cents to the US through COVID. I remember not screaming on the phone to clients, but being quite verbose, saying, do it, do it, do it. No, it's got to get 55 and then bang up to 60 before we knew it. And I'd like to give those, I told you so, to clients when I, almost put them in a headlock and they didn't do it. So, so coming up to, Jay's question, to me, the answer is frequent and often. You don't need to bulk it up. Sometimes it depends on the country you're in. If you're in a place like China, where you have to go to a branch and do about an hour and a half worth of paperwork, then you might want to do it quarterly, because unless you like spending a lot of time in banks, these days in most westernized countries, as well as most countries for that fact, quite easy to transfer using apps and so forth. So to me, I always say to clients, link it or associate it with when you get paid. You get paid on the 15th of the month, make a transfer on the 16th. Don't try and be a clever dick. That's the biggest thing we always talk to clients about is you can, with confirmation buyers, you can convince yourself 6 ways from Sunday in terms of how things are looking. So do it frequent and often, take the emotion out of it, set a date, and then just do it. And if you have extra and the rate is really good, then take advantage of it as well. But where we see currencies right now, it's got a 63 in front of it. Can it have a 61? Potentially, yeah. So, but there is no guarantees. All we need is a good bit of news out of China. Commodity prices go up. Guess what? Australian dollar goes up, and then the opportunity is lost. So, So to answer the question, Jay, frequent and often.
Yep. Dollar cost averaging, always.
Definitely, mate. So, look, I've got a question for you, James. Which one I'm going to use? I think we'll go with, in terms of, are there any tax penalties? This is from Timmy. Are there any tax penalties for moving wealth back to Oz after being a US expat and non-resident of Australia for greater than 12 years? All taxes have been paid to the IRS on earnings.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's definitely a few flow charts I could go down. It depends on Timmy's, I suppose, remaining ties to the United States. If he's just on an E3 visa, really clean cut, and once he's left, he can look at doing some wealth transferring, whether it's selling down assets or moving things back by contributions into super. So you definitely can, but that's not an easy, straightforward cut, because in the event you're still tethered to the US, i.e. having a green card, there could be things like exit taxes based on your net worth or your average tax liability over the last 5 years. So that's not an easy one to answer, but absolutely there are ways to reduce exposure to tax. Just having the right strategy. I know I've got some clients right now, giving you guys some insight that they've accumulated a large portfolio of shares through employer shares over the last 15 years in the United States. They've been on E3s, no intention of getting green cards. Because they've been in the US for so long, they're going to get Social Security. That's great little income supplement for retirement, but they've got way too much exposure to two single stocks. So what we want to do there is unwind that kind of, I suppose, not very diversified portfolio. They're approaching retirement. We want to squirrel as much into super as possible via the right strategy. And then we're going to use another portion of the proceeds to pay off a bit of debt and shore up a few other aspects as well. There's a bit of tax planning and tax structuring that with the trust. So there's definitely a few things that can be done, but it also just depends on your remaining ties and tether back to the United States. You've also got the tricky state taxes, which can be a little bit sticky to you as well. I know California, they don't miss you.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, mate. I think people haven't used the word heart as often as they've used, the Heart Tax Act, when they're referring to greater than 8 years in the US, and it is a stinger, and it's not designed for expats. It's actually designed for US citizens trying to claw themselves away from the IRS. But obviously expats get caught up in that as well too. So so to answer your question, Timmy, there's always tax when the IRS is involved, but it can be managed, and it's why it's important when you are looking at repatriation, planning 12 to 18 months out, and sort of taking that stage approach. Is you'll do different things in different financial years to try and smooth that effect. But it can be certainly done. So
that's right.
Thanks for the question, Timmy.
I've got a question now for you, Brett. Matthew.
Go.
A long one. I'll read it as is, though. How do I access good investment options from outside Australia? I'm currently living in Peru, and I've been here for a little while now, just over 8 years. I've got some savings that I'd like to put towards some investments, and I'd like to access direct shares, ETFs, managed funds with a view of doing some dollar cost averaging and contributing. I've looked at options where I am, and it's non-existent. Where are some good options, and can I still invest?
No, there's two principles here. So generally speaking, we always say you want to accumulate wealth in the country you intend to return to or retire to. So that means that most Australian expats do their investing outside of Australia. Sorry, in Australia, investing outside from there. So domiciled in Australia, but investing globally. The reason for that, it's a jurisdiction that is the most highly regulated financial jurisdiction in the world. It's a jurisdiction that expats, understand and trust. So then we've got the added complexity of what options you can choose. In the past, CommSec, CMC, anti-stockbroking, NAB trade, blah, 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 the whole list of the discount brokers, that was the go-to. Then we had the advent of what we call the Common Reporting Standard, which is a global data sharing initiative between 150 odd territories and countries, sharing data back and forth and making the world very small from a digital perspective. Because of that, and because of the extra workload required of that, all the discount brokers have said no more expats. And the reason for that is because they run very thin margins, and if expats are 1% of their client base, I guarantee there'll be 30% of their compliance resources being used. So they've just taken this blanket rule, no more expats. So when it comes to what are the other options, there are, off the top of my head, 4 or 5 platforms that can be used. It will depend on your jurisdiction, but they all are what we call advised platforms or advised accounts, which means you have to have an advisor on the account. And the reason for that is they want to make sure that, Matthew in Peru is not Fatima sitting in Kabul funneling terrorism money for the Taliban. So having that advisor and the legal requirements what that advisor has to go through to identify the client's proof of wealth and all that sort of stuff with anti-money laundering gives those platforms peace of mind, saying, okay, yes, we'll let Matthew come into our platform and do it, but you need to have an advisor on that account.
That's right.
Third issue as well too, coming back to Matthew's question, he wants to focus on products in the US if possible. This is a bit of a red flag. And what he, by doing this, he's going to potentially expose himself to US estate planning tax. So if you hold US domiciled accounts, investments and so forth, and you unfortunately pass away, either your partner, spouse or estate will only receive 70% of your account balance. A lot of people don't know it. Interactive Brokers, very popular platform. A lot of other platforms, that people love to use. People don't realize, and it's funny how they'll use Interactive Brokers to save themselves 0.5% on fees, but they'll lose 30% of the balance if they die while they've got an account there. So, they're 29.5% worse off than using something else. So, So just to answer Matthew's question, there are options in Australia to invest globally. They're not discount brokers, so you will need to have an advised account, but there certainly are options in Australia, that's for sure.
That's right. Yep.
Hey, question for you from Stephen. Simple one. Can I buy an existing property as a non-resident?
Certainly can. I'm hoping he means back in Australia, but you certainly can. There's not really an issue there. I'm looking at some comments being directed to sort of foreign investment, or that's probably referring to FIRB, Foreign Investment Review Board. If you're an Australian citizen or a PR, permanent resident of Australia, but you're now a non-resident living overseas, you can still buy property back in Australia. Probably the biggest challenge that I see my clients face when they want to invest in property back in Australia is they aren't boots on the ground. So they either rely on family or friends to visit properties, and it's a very big transaction. Remember, property is one of the largest transactions we all have and experience. So it's sometimes worthwhile maybe engaging someone to give you that sound advice, and that's where a buyer's advocacy firm or buyer's agent might come into the piece, just so you can get some unbiased advice from them. They're working for you rather than hearing the general feedback from the real estate agent that's working for the vendor. So in summary, can definitely purchase property back in Australia. But the other hurdle is financing, making sure you're getting treated correctly by the banks, and that's why I always recommend using a broker, because brokers will pick up things banks won't, and you don't want to be sort of tarnished with the same brush that someone somewhere else is. So make sure you're working with someone that can actually really assess your situation. They've got their go-tos, go-to lenders as well for your jurisdiction based on that credit guide, and then off you go. So summary, yes, you can invest or buy property back in Australia as a non-resident.
And that's a good segue to let the folks know about the Expat Mortgage podcast that we've got that you and Jeremy run. So Jeremy is the head of Atlas Mortgages, specialises in expat loans for Aussies living overseas. Link will be down below. You can have a look at that podcast as well. Make sure you follow that along, because James and Jeremy just do massive deep dives into the property area, how to finance it, refinance it, developing, you name it. So, but mate, I think we leave it there for the day for the good folks. I think we've filled their bandwidth when it comes to knowledge. So thank you very much, guys, once again. Link to the relocation guide will be down below. Link to James and Jeremy's channel down below as well. And James, thanks always, mate, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for your time, Brett. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. See you next time.
Thanks, mate.